Today's lesson is Chapter 13, Lesson 8, and it is called the discriminant. It is the last portion of Chapter 13 that we will be studying together. If you remember, every time we have talked about quadratic equations, I have tried to point out to you that a quadratic equation, when it is graphed, looks like a parabola. And if you may remember, a parabola could cross the x-axis 2 times, or it could simply land on the x-axis at the vertex of it, or it may hang above the x-axis and therefore never cross x at all. Now, if you think really hard, you'll remember that we're trying to solve for x, and the answers for x are where we get the parabola crossing the x-axis. So when we have a parabola that is way above the x-axis, we do not have any solutions at all for x. The discriminant is simply part of the quadratic formula. And you remember the quadratic formula, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And the discriminant is simply this part of that formula. The b squared minus the 4ac has nothing whatsoever to do with the radical. You don't have to worry about the radical at all. That is just the b squared minus 4ac. Let me give you an idea of how this works. Let's say we had the quadratic equation x squared minus 2x minus 3 equals 0. Well, we can tell by looking at it, it's a nice standard form here, that a is 1, b equals negative 2, and c equals negative 3. Now, if we use the formula for the discriminant, which is b squared minus 4 times a times c, we're simply going to plug in negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 3. In this case, negative 2 squared is 4, and we have a negative 4 times 1, which is negative 4, times a negative 3, which is a positive 12. And so we get as our answer for the discriminant 16. Now, this is not the answer for x. Let me tell you what the discriminant shows us. Okay, if the discriminant gives us a positive number such as 16, then we get two solutions for x. Okay, that's all the discriminant tells us. It tells us how many solutions we're going to find for x. Now, in this case, if we went ahead and did the quadratic formula, again, we have a equals 1, b equals negative 2, c equals negative 3. Okay, we plug it into the formula. X equals negative b, or negative of negative 2, which is positive 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared, negative 2 squared, minus 4 times 1 times negative 3. And the discriminant part should look really familiar to you, all over 2a. Okay, so we're going to simply go ahead and do our math here. We get 2 plus or minus square root of negative 2 squared is 4, minus 4 times 1, which is 4, times negative 3, which is negative 12. We subtract a negative, and we end up with positive 12. And so we get 16, okay, all over 2. Now, we know that the square root of 16 is easily found. So we get 4 for that, and we have 2 plus or minus 4 over 2. Okay, and we know that 2 plus 4 is 6. 6 divided by 2 equals 3. 2 minus 4 is negative 2. Divided by 2 is negative 1. Okay, and if you recall, our discriminant told us that we would have two solutions because our discriminant is a positive number. So there are our two solutions. Now, the discriminant can also tell us that we have less than two solutions. If we did the discriminant for this problem, we would say that a is 1, b is negative 4, c equals positive 4. In this case, we're going to just use the discriminant formula, which is b squared minus 4 times a times c. Okay, b squared is negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 4. Obviously, negative 4 squared is 16. Okay, negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 times 4 is negative 16. Okay, 16 minus 16 equals 0. Now another thing about discriminant is if you get 0 for your answer, then you know that you get one solution for x. Okay, if we got a positive number, we had two solutions for x. So we have a negative number, one solution for x. Okay, let me show you how this works. If we did the quadratic formula using that exact same equation, again, a is 1, b is negative 4, c is positive 4. We put it into our whole formula this time. Okay, x equals negative b, or negative negative 4, which ends up being a positive 4. Okay, plus or minus the square root of b squared. Well, negative 4 squared is 16, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times another 4, which is 16. So 16 minus 16 all over 2a, or 2 times 1, which is just 2. Okay, now if you look, we get 4 plus or minus nothing, right? Because now we have the square root of 16 minus 16, which is simply the square root of 0, which again is 0. So we don't have to worry about this plus or minus the square root of anything. It's gone. So we simply have 4 over 2, which equals 2. Okay, so we got one solution. Remember, when we did our discriminant, we came up with 0 as the answer for the discriminant, and that told us we had one solution. When we go ahead and solve the problem, we find out that yes, that's all we have is one solution for x squared minus 4x plus 4. Now the discriminant can also tell us something else. So let's use a different equation. If we had x squared plus 3x plus 5 equals 0, we know that a is 1, b is 3, c is 5. Okay, again, the formula for the discriminant is b squared minus 4 times a times c. We're going to go ahead and plug in our numbers. 3 squared, or b squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 5. Well, 3 squared is 9, okay, and 4 times 1 is 4, times 5 is 20. 9 minus 20 is negative 11. The discriminant here is negative 11. When we get a negative number for the discriminant, there are no solutions for x. Okay, no solutions. And again, let me show you by using the quadratic formula. We'll use the same equation, x squared plus 3x plus 5 equals 0. Okay, a is 1, b is 3, c is 5. Again, we're going to go x equals negative b, or negative 3, plus or minus the square root, b squared, which is 9, minus 4 times a, which is 1, or 4, times c. It would be 4 times 5, which is 20. Okay, all divided by 2a, okay, which is just simply 2. So we get negative 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 11 divided by 2. Okay, now we've learned that we can't take the square root of a negative 11. Okay, that's an imaginary number. So therefore, this whole thing becomes no solution for x. Okay, so if remember, I don't mean to be boring, but if we go back, whoops, wrong page. If we go back to our discriminant, we found that we got a negative 11, which meant that we had no solutions. And indeed, when we solve the problem, we find out we have this impossible kind of thing going on because we just can't do that. So we end up with no solution. So here's our quadratic formula, which you should have memorized by now. Just keep in mind that the discriminant is simply this part of it. You don't have to worry about the radical. All you're going to look at is b squared minus 4ac. Okay, if this equals a positive number, okay, then you have two solutions. If it equals 0, then you only have one solution. And if you get a negative number, you have no solutions. Okay? 3 possibilities. You're not finding what x equals here unless your book tells you to continue and go ahead and solve for x. But the discriminant simply tells you how many answers you have. And because of that, you can really know how your graph is going to look. Okay? Whoops, that's a pitchfork. All right, there's your graph. It could land right there on x and have 1 solution. It could cross x twice and have 2 solutions. It could be floating in the air and have none. So have a great day. Hope that you learned this lesson well. Bye-bye.